So just quickly, what year were you booted out?
Well, I was booted out when it first went wrong.
This was the Miscavige years.
This was when Miscavige had just taken over in 1981, 1982, and circumstances actually converged to make it happen that I got thrown out, and I'm very lucky that I got thrown out. Very lucky indeed. There by the grace of God. Maybe I'd have stayed in there and became unfree, I don't know. So I'm just very lucky.
What about you there?
I certainly think that in the Church of Scientology, it's lots of brainwashing. In the independent or free zone, there's not very much brainwashing. You have to search to find it. But then, brainwashing is a very wide subject. Education itself is brainwashing, especially if you do something like go to a Catholic school. You'd be taught a particular religion, any religious school, or almost any religion. But schools are sort of, in a sense, brainwashing. In a very benign way, you're getting knowledge, but often you get slanted ideas put along with it. Yeah. So it's very important to be able to get make sure your own judgment is very good, so that you can see any such trap in any situation in life and avoid getting any sort of brainwashing. And Scientology has certainly helped me with that.
Yeah, I wouldn't like to claim that I didn't think that I was doing something good, when in actual fact probably I was getting people into something that probably not everybody I got into there got what was good for them. So I wouldn't like to claim that what I was doing was 100% good. It probably wasn't. Probably a lot of people I got into Scientology didn't get what was good for them, so I wasn't entirely not brainwashed. I wouldn't like to claim that, you know.
The other question I'd like to ask is, you talked about powers and that, but I've heard people claim, the telekinesis, the moving glasses. Do you all acknowledge now that you can't leave your body at will, you can't move a glass, you haven't got special powers, you're not a higher being than anybody else?
No, I can leave my body at will.
Do you believe that, really?
I can leave my body
but
at
you
will.
can't do it now here in front of us.
I can leave my body at will, but not when I'm driving. It's not a very good idea.
Anybody else?
I actually did a survey on this with people who've been in Scientology a very long time, were highly trained. By the way, on leaving the body at will, this is a common thing and is often an end phenomenon of certain Scientology auditing processes. And leaving your body at will, there might be various different descriptions people could give. Anyway, I actually surveyed a lot of older Scientologists who were around with Hubbard for something called the ability of cleared theta clear. And it's stated in the Scientology dictionary that a cleared theta clear can move matter by thought alone.
Yeah,
so I thought, right, let's see, is this true? So I surveyed a lot of people who are top of the bridge, did all the training, and maybe something like 15 people I spoke to acknowledged that they had some effect that was not repeatable, or they could do it once or maybe twice. For example, rolling a pencil across a table without touching it, seeing through walls, but these weren't developed, and they couldn't repeat them. But it did happen occasionally to a few people. So there is a kernel of truth behind that, and if you accept that man is a spiritual being, it may indicate that the spiritual path might lead somewhere like
Who
that.
did that?
I didn't do that.
Is it worth 100 grand though?
Pardon?
Is it worth 100 grand?
No.
Well, I certainly haven't begun to pay anywhere near that. I haven't even paid 10 grand. Okay. Then I've done a lot of my Scientology outside the church.
Are you aware of the phrase astral travel?
Yes.
Okay. Do you understand astral travel? Would you say that your leaving your body experience would be akin to astral travel?
Absolutely not. And I don't go very far out of my body. I mean, and many people in India can do things that I don't go anywhere near, and they don't pay anything.
Yeah, exactly, it's free, yeah.
And maybe the things I did before I got into Scientology have just been stabilised by having auditing. And that I'd done a lot of this before I even got into Scientology. And as I say, people in India are doing things way beyond, but these things are stable from auditing. So, I mean, this is what I was trying to say when I first answered the question. I'd had spiritual experiences prior to Scientology, but I liked the practicality of the auditing. It's more stable because it's done on a more stable scientific basis.
Can I ask, exteriorization was one of the things that attracted me to Scientology. I'm an ex-Scientologist. I would have considered myself very hardcore in my beliefs. Like, I would have said Hubbard was absolutely correct on many things. Now I've absolutely no respect for Hubbard or his work, but I did come across a documentary whereby scientists were now, as I say again, exteriorization really attracted me as one of the things that kept me in for so long, that I wanted to achieve this state for myself. Now, I'm very interested in science and philosophy and so on, and this documentary showed scientists kind of replicating this feeling of exteriorization in just any chosen individual. They sat them down, they were playing with magnetic fields, they were doing certain other things, I forget now exactly what they were doing, but the guy felt like he left his body.
Yeah.
Now, would you be open to a more scientific kind of, would you be open to scientific information on that? Like if someone was to present you documentation that, look, we've sat 20 people down, they're not spiritual, they don't believe in very much, we ran them through this experiment, and 80% of them, at the end of our scientific experiment, said they felt they left their body, but, you know, there is more kind of physical, I guess, explanations of it, that it was more illusion than actuality, in that, you know, you say you can't leave very far. You know, the whole idea of being able to leave your body is that, okay, just go into town right now.
Be anywhere.
Be anywhere.
Be
That's the value of it, you know?
Yeah, I think probably children are probably exterior a lot of the time. I think, you know, I think it's probably a very natural thing. I think that probably children are naturally exterior to their body
So I guess
a lot of the time. And I think there is probably a lot of scientific evidence that, you know, exteriorization is probably a natural.
Sorry, I should clarify.
I would answer that question differently, and this is why, you know, not all independent Scientologists or free zone Scientologists.
But can I boil it down? Sorry,
Yeah,
I should
yeah.
clarify
Yeah.
that, you know, they were showing that this is a brain function, that, you know, this was psychologists and
But
psychiatrists.
that's what I was going to answer. I wouldn't be able to rule out a sensation of, after having a few glasses of wine. I wouldn't be able to say, did the wine make me go exterior, or is this a physical sensation? And it's the same. I'm just saying I have a different experience.
Okay.
That I couldn't say for sure, yes, that was exteriorization, or actually I was just feeling really happy and there was some chemical released in the brain.
Okay.
I'm just saying, from my personal experience, I certainly when I went exterior, felt like I was exterior to the body, felt like I was released from the body, felt better, but I wouldn't be able to definitively say 100% that was exteriorization, as opposed to that was just a good feeling, which I'll get from talking to a close friend or having a really good day. So I'm just saying I would not entirely disagree, and I think these things are perhaps a matter of personal belief and have to remain there, where there can't actually be any scientific proof. you know. And I'm not saying that as just, you know, as somebody who still uses Scientology in my life. I'm not saying that to avoid the question. I'm saying even as somebody who likes Scientology and uses some of it, I would, as a, you know, and I reached a fairly high level in Scientology, but for me there are still things that aren't 100% proven.
Yes.
I'm sort of acknowledging that point with you, I guess.
Yes.
And just pointing out not every Scientologist feels the same way outside of the church, whereas inside of the church, I suppose the definitive answer to your question would be absolutely not.
Right.
Okay, so the point of this documentary was that these scientists claimed that, you know, it was a brain function, it was an illusion.
I
basically, there was nothing spiritual about it whatsoever.
Okay.
think again it comes down to a point of what you feel it was for you. The scientist has his belief, the spiritualist has his belief, and it's an age-old dispute.
Interesting.
Okay, well, we're not going to answer this question here today, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Exactly.
The one way,
100 years time, we
the
might
one
have
way
some answers.
you can be sure of leaving your body when you die, that's for sure. And any questions you may have about the subject will be answered then. Did you say you had 3 questions, very quickly?
Yeah, the last question I'd like to know is about, are your attitudes, all of your attitudes that you were, I would say indoctrinated with when you're in Scientology, about psychology and psychiatry, do you still have the same attitude towards those people, to medical and people, you know, psychology?
Me, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think we were brainwashed to believe that all psychologists and all psychiatrists were bad people.
Yeah.
That we can agree on.
Yeah.
Yes.
But also doctors and nurses as well, you know.
And journalists.
Scientologists know best. Absolutely, yeah. Can I just, Scientologists know best about every subject under the sun.
Yes.
Whether they know about it or not, they know better than the experts in that subject. It's a strange mental place, but yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Definitely brainwashed.
So how far into psychology did you all get? Like how far along the bridge or whatever, and how did that affect you sort of on a day-to-day basis? What were you doing?
Into psychology or into Scientology?
Scientology.
Scientology.
Freudian slip.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
How far along did you get and what were you sort of doing?
I got to operating level 5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's pretty much the top at the time.
It's quite high up.
Yeah.
And how did that, the second question?
What were you sort of doing as part of, you know, how was being a Scientologist? What were you?
At the point I was an OT5, I was a full-time dedicated Scientologist. Like, that was my life.
Mm-hmm.
I was going on course, studying Scientology. You know, it felt like a crime to do something like watching the TV when I could be driving around, recovering people who are no longer Scientologists. So basically, I think pretty much throughout my time as a Scientologist, it was something I did full time. My friends were Scientologists. The people I worked with were Scientologists, and it was, you know, it's very much pushed to be the most important thing in your life. And right up until I left, when I got to OT5, it was the most important thing in my life. And I was 18 years in it, and I guess I came out because there's probably one thing that's more important in my life, or would always be more important in my life than Scientology, and that was my children. And I guess when my children, when I saw the damage that was being done to my children, and started to realize what was going on, my love of my children was enough to get me out.
How did you see it damaging the children?
nothing had changed about my views regarding Scientology. But I had begun to research, I'd begun to do the forbidden, I'd begun to research on the internet. I'd begun to read the suppressive newspaper articles and the terrible things that were being said about Scientology. And I began to think, you know what? Maybe it's not all lies, because if it is, there's an interesting point that a lot of exes like to make. Any critics outside of the Scientology, suppressive persons, very evil persons, are supposed to be 2.5% of 20% of the population. It's a very small minority, and I'd sort of looked around at some point and realized the world had become very, very hostile, because every friend, I had a lot of friends, well, not a huge number, but I had a lot of friends that were Scientologists and had left, and now they were suppressives. And all the journalists were suppressives, and actually a lot of people I really liked were suppressives. And in fact, I love suppressives. So it began to become a little sort of, when I started to get a sniff that there was corruption at the top of the organization, because things were starting to seriously not add up for me anymore. And I guess with the advent of Anonymous and the protests, it was now in our faces. Where, I mean, the church, the cult likes to very much shelter people, and you'll notice when they don't allow their public to talk to Anonymous or to talk to people outside, because the danger is, as occurred with me, once I was aware of Anonymous's presence, and they started yelling things at me, that I sort of went, well, you know what, they've got a point. You know what? And once I guess public opinion had got against the church, had got loud enough and vocal enough, and people had stopped being afraid to the point where there were enough people speaking out that they felt they could too. That was enough. At that point, I started to see it was dangerous for me, and it was dangerous for my children. And whatever spiritual beliefs I might have, this was a very crazy and very dangerous organization, and my next priority was to get my kids out.
Sam, do you mind if I ask you, what did Anonymous yell at you, and was it abusive?
No. Thinking way back here, of course you had the big, I remember driving down Fort Harrison, where we're in Florida, and having the big dollar signs. Scientology with the big dollar signs, and you can't, as a Scientologist, you can't walk past that and go, yeah, I know it's really expensive, but, yeah, I know we've got no money, but. So that's in your face right away. That's sort of what shouts at you right away. And just, there was nothing abusive. At the time, there were a lot of protests about Lisa McPherson, and I'd actually undergone an interrogation in the church, because I'd gone online and I'd read the stories about Lisa McPherson, and I'd actually gotten into a debate with a number of Anonymous and various other persons about it. And I was interrogated by the church about that, and told under no uncertain terms not to talk to Anonymous about it, not to talk to anyone about it, not to read these terrible lies. And then you'd walk out and there was Anonymous in your face with like, hey, there's somebody. I think that was a point where Anonymous would not be listened to, was over Lisa McPherson. Anonymous was standing there going, there is a dead person. And I think that's, it was around the time of Lisa McPherson that we started to really notice the protests ramping up.
Right.
And the presence of Anonymous. And does that answer the question?
Mm-hmm. John, did Anonymous have effect on you?
Yeah, in a very subtle way, but it was 2 or 3 years after the fact, after they started protesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
But was it a positive influence, or were they yelling abuse at you?
No,
or?
they weren't yelling abuse at me.
Okay.
I abused them a few times on my way into course, but that was it.
All right, thanks.
But now they're a solid ally.
Okay, rather than take any breaks, I'm just going to propose to keep on going until everyone's had enough. If anyone does want to take a quick break, just take
Just
it.
nip out, is that all right?
Yeah, nip out and come back, you know. I think that's going to be the best way to do it. Right, anyone got a question for the panel? Sorry.
Oh, no, I was just going to ask if the questions could go along the panel, because we're getting sort of...
You'd prefer that to happen, would you?
Well, just to hear sort of range of...
Okay.
Answers, yeah.
That's okay, we can do that, yeah, sure.
But did you how far along the bridge did you get?
I got up to OT3.
So you found out about Xenu.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, when you found out about Xenu, did you not? I'd like to ask Sam. Actually, she's gone. And how far did you get along the bridge?
I got to the top at the time, which was the same as Sam.
Right. So, and Xenu. When they said Xenu, you know, this happened. This.
Volcano.
Yeah, I was a bit shocked. Yeah, a bit shocked.
Because Jason McGhee said, you know, when I heard about it, I thought this is crazy, but I accepted it. And that just shows the mental state he was in. He said,
the thing is that you go pretty much straight into session after you've read it, and the needle kind of goes boom, 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 and you're trained to say that if it gets reaction on the needle and you get all this reaction, you just carry on with the session. So that's what I did.
And when you hear about this, did you not want to go out and say to somebody, Jesus, you're going to believe what I just heard? Like, how do you keep that in yourself, that you don't want to go home and tell your husband or tell somebody that's not quite there, like, you know, my God, wait till they hear what's going to happen?
Well, it wasn't all over the internet in those days, you see. There was no internet. I'm ancient, so there was no internet. Nobody knew about it in those days, so I had to keep it confidential. So I was one of the early days, so I had to keep it confidential. And as I say, I was auditing every day, and the needle was going boom, 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 boom. So I just had to keep auditing it, and it worked. So I had to take it on Ron Hubbard's say-so. And funnily enough, now that Andrew Marr is doing his history of the world, with all these pictures of the volcanic dust and everything, 70,000 years ago, volcanic dust all over this planet. So
35 million years.
So, well, yeah, and it does say actually approximately.
Have you seen the OT materials that are freely available online?
Exactly. I don't know whether people want to research it. I would suggest don't. I would suggest, don't bother, really, to research all that stuff.
Now, when you say don't bother, as in, do you fear that someone will get pneumonia?
No, actually. It's surprising how people do actually survive all that. And that it might be, yet again, somebody wanting to have control over people, to say, how serious it might be if you get this confidential material, and yet more control over people, to say how you should keep it so terribly confidential, and how people are surviving reading all this material. But we were told, you must keep it terribly confidential, and you have your locked briefcase, and you pay all this money, and you get your locked briefcase, and everything. Yeah.
Do you think there is a strong possibility that someone could suffer a mental illness like schizophrenia if they are listening to the voices in their heads, and they are, I guess, for want of a better word, validating the voices that are in their heads as if these voices are something real, like Hubbard teaches Scientologists at that level that your body is jam-packed full of other spiritual beings, and these spiritual beings make up all your problems. They're the ones that are affecting your thoughts. And obviously the OT levels, from my understanding, I didn't pay the church to audit them, but I've read the OT materials. And my understanding is that the body is just full of millions and millions of spiritual beings that are confused and disoriented, and they're affecting your thoughts. You've got to get rid of them telepathically, and when you do that, you'll have these superpowers. But my understanding now, as a human being again, is that that creates schizophrenia. It makes you mentally ill, basically.
Well,
Possibly.
Possibly.
well, this is yet again an unknown, but
Okay.
this may be of interest to you. That metapsychology, which is the branch of well, I wouldn't call it. I don't think they'd like to be known as independent. They're not independent, but they use the technology completely free of the copyrights.
Okay.
And they use the technology completely rewritten. It was done by Sarge Gabodi, who's a psychiatrist. They did a deal with the Church of Scientology a long, long time ago, right back in '82, when this original schism happened, when the independents, if you like, completely independent, did a deal, rewrote the materials. And they have like really nice offices, and they train psychologists, psychiatrists, anyone from the NHS, and they use the stuff, the technology, if you like, and they use it. And they will actually they will audit, they will counsel people, and they will sometimes counsel people with entities. And some people do benefit from this.
So you do OT3 on the NHS?
Basically, yes.
I have no doubt that
it can help some people.
You see, this is the crux of my question here. I have no doubt that people can experience within their own minds a reality that they think there is another being or there's another entity within their body, smashed up with them as a separate entity. But I'm just not sure if that's a spiritual entity or is that like, a brain dysfunction
or are you just nuts, basically?
I mean, Buddhism.
Is it dangerous to be?
Is it dangerous to get into that?
This?
I personally wouldn't wish to do that on somebody, but Buddhism recognizes this as a possibility. I think Shintoism does. But personally, I don't think it's probably a very good idea.
Now, one of the reasons I stayed in Scientology so long was hearing wins from quote-unquote OTs.
Mm-hmm.
And one guy who I knew was OT 5 at the time, a good earner, made lots of money, seemed to have a very stable life, seemed to be a very stable chap. Now, he was telling me things like he left his body and went to the other side of the moon. And he was like, his brother got sick and needed a surgery and was going to die. And he left his body, went into the operation room, lifted out a black mass out of his body. And miraculously, his brother was not ill anymore and made a miraculous recovery. Now, all these things were told to me from, this person who I thought was quite successful in life, quite stable, not crazy. So, I thought there must be some truth there. I mean, why would this together individual tell me something so bananas that, like, it was, it was his experience that he was doing these things. And I guess my question is, do you think there's any truth to him visiting the moon and being able to remotely heal his brother?
Well, if somebody's stuck in the middle of that level, if somebody has had that stuff already been audited on them in Scientology, and they come to me and they're in the middle of it, then I would certainly not leave them stuck in the middle of it, let's put it that way.
Okay,
I would get them finished with what they'd started.
Okay.
But somebody that had never ever opened up that entity's level, I wouldn't get them started on it.
Okay.
That's my personal way of dealing with it.
Yeah, okay.